welcome to The Audible, presented by Trader Joe's. I'm Ralph Russo from The Athletic, joined today, as always, by my colleague Stuart Mandel and Bruce Feldman. Don't forget, every episode of the show is on YouTube now. Find us at Audible Show over on YouTube. Today, we have a really interesting story that Bruce and a couple of our colleagues worked on about Sherrone Moore. We have some news on USC and Notre Dame, some news on Bobby Petrino and North Carolina, and of course, we dive into the mailbag. But we're going to start with, again, what was sort of like a great story on The Athletic. I'm going to throw it to you, Bruce. Some very interesting details unearthed by yourself, Katie Strang, and Austin Meek dove into what went on with Sherrone Moore, not necessarily after he got fired and then subsequently arrested, but what was leading up to that and some of the things that he might have been doing that may have been already red flags for Michigan. So I'm going to throw it to you, Bruce, and tell us what we found out.
You know, we had been digging into a lot of rumors, and I think we had reported it on a bunch of different levels. The overarching thing to me is there was an epic level of dysfunction going on in that program, and especially as it relates to Sherrone Moore. I'll be honest, as we were reporting this, there was a lot of stuff that I just kept on thinking, if this happened at like a junior college program somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you'd be like, oof, that's crazy. The fact that it happened at the University of Michigan, the bluest of blue bloods, coming off a national title, is mind-blowing. I mean, some of the details of him, Sherrone Moore, just basically randomly DMing strangers, women that he saw online on Instagram, but not only just DMing them, but DMing them like right before and right after games. I mean, this is a married man with 3 kids, and you're the head coach at Michigan. Like, it's just, you know, if this was somebody on their staff, you'd be like, ooh, that's crazy. The fact that this was the head coach doing this. And then, you know, what we really were able to get into a lot of was, I don't want to say his mindset, but just the volatile nature and how, paranoid he had gotten, and how, I guess it would be, preoccupied he'd gotten with this inappropriate relationship he was having with somebody who worked in the Michigan, basically worked for him. And I think the layers of that, so you had like kind of 2 different tracks that kind of met. You had the one where I think a lot of people that I had spoken to inside Michigan didn't know of the stuff that Katie Strang had really unearthed in her reporting from talking to a lot of women who had interacted in some way with Sherrone Moore. The stuff that, I had heard a lot about was just what was going on in terms of the culture was a mess inside the program. And there were players who lived in the same complex that this woman lives in. And somebody had told me late one night, they saw Sherrone Moore there in the complex, and it just kind of blew their mind for a second. And then they would see his SUV overnight there some nights. And so it seemed to be a really poorly kept secret. And from our reporting, that there had been people at Michigan who had tried to address this with him. And what we don't know yet, is when some of these things were checked in on, what was the reaction inside Michigan leadership in the investigation. I think we'll find out more about those things coming up, because there's obviously an investigation going on now. But just, I think I mentioned this to Stu in passing this morning. One of the former coaches I talked to, I'd asked him his impressions of this, because this is a guy who's not on staff there now, but he had said, he thought back to when Sherrone got incredibly emotional after they beat Penn State, and he's teary-eyed and he's cursing and he's talking about God. And it was just this crazy mix of overcome with emotions. And this person was like, that was that was kind of weird and embarrassing for him. And he felt like there was a lot of stuff that you were starting to go, okay, some of the stuff doesn't make sense, but it starts to add up a little more now when you're seeing his mindset and some of the things that Sherrone was doing and the paranoia of eavesdropping on meetings and different things that, we had reported on in this story. It's crazy that it happened at Michigan, but I know you guys are going to go, yeah, it's another crazy thing that happened at Michigan.
Well, obviously everybody's going to focus understandably on the relationship with the woman. And obviously the story leads with all these details about the interactions he had with women on social media. But like you just alluded to at the end there, Bruce, what is also notable to me is there were signs, even there were signs in kind of the day-to-day, the way he conducted himself day-to-day in the office that would make you go, whoa, something's not right here. You said you guys wrote, Moore would break down sobbing in staff meetings and lash out at other coaches. He was seen eavesdropping on closed-door meetings inside Schembechler Hall, and fellow staff members became concerned about his mental state. Okay, let's think about that for a second. Fellow staff members became concerned about his mental state. If that is the case, how on earth did he continue to serve as the head coach of Michigan all season? Even if they didn't have cause to fire him yet, shouldn't somebody have said, we need to put him on leave, we need to... he can't be leading the program right now because of these. It seems like it was just an open secret. It wasn't even really like there were people in the building who knew something's not right.
Yeah. And I think the question, and I've said this on our podcast multiple times, having, been working on this story for a couple of weeks, is the AD Ward Manuel going to survive this? Because I think the question, and this has come up a lot in our reporting from some of the conversations I had, was, I think it's an old Watergate line. What did they know and when did they know it? And this was kind of framed to me as, how did you not know? It was like, how did you not know? And that was the thing that's glaring. And again, Ward Manuel has been there for a while, and they've had a lot of scandals inside that athletic program, not just inside the football program, but most notably in the football program. This is one that it'll be interesting to see where the paper trail leads them in this, because, one of the things that we had internal discussions about was, a lot of people report to Sherrone. It's not like, they can say, oh, I think he should take a leave of absence. They're not the authority to be able to be in position to do that. So I think that's the part where it gets kind of complicated, and you wonder what exactly was going on with the AD, even the AD of football at that point too. There's a couple of pieces of that, but most notably the AD. And you got to remember, this is a university, the president, it's an interim president now. It's just a lot of real uncertainty. And I would just say there's a lot of dysfunction there.
So a couple of things stood out to me. There was some details that you guys reported about the nature of what makes an inappropriate relationship. Some details there that you can actually have a relationship with one of your subordinates as long as the subordinate has initiated the relationship. So that's interesting. And also this idea that if the university is going to take some action, it really does need to have some compliance or cooperation with the people involved. In other words, you can say it's an open secret. We see them here and there, but if the people involved are not working with you as a university to take official action, that was going to be a stumbling block. So when we sort of say it was an open secret and people kind of knew, who exactly knew and who could prove things that made them can take some action. The other thing is, because you're right, then there's all this other stuff of hey, a bunch of red flags here. And I do wonder a couple of things come into play. A, they weren't playing that poorly, right? Ultimately, on the field, Michigan was playing okay, right? They pretty good year last year, despite a tough circumstances, and they beat Ohio State. This year, 9 wins with a freshman quarterback. So if you're a university that's in flux at the top with your university president, and you have an AD who is sort of banked on this coach, and you really don't want to do a coaching search because they suck, and we found out how much ADs hate coaching searches and how much they suck, do you think, listen, like, things aren't going great with Sherrone, but if we can work with him a little bit, he's a young coach, and get some assistants in here, and maybe we can help him out here. Like, I just think that, and also, like, this stuff doesn't look great. And if we do fire him, how much of it comes out? Do we want to sort of protect Michigan's integrity by hoping that we can get Sherrone to this? That always backfires on any organization that decides, hey, maybe we can get through the rough part and not look stupid on the other end, and then you end up not being able to get through the rough part and looking even more stupid. So I don't think that justifies any of the reasons we got here, but I'm trying to look into the mindset of how did we get here, and how did he not get fired sooner, and how did this not come into play sooner? How, all these other things. I think I see the path to how we ended up with this thing exploding in December.
There's two things to keep in mind, too. One is, remember, when Sherrone Moore got in trouble with the NCAA, it was one of the things was for deleting messages on his phone. Now, the question is, what access? Because remember, Michigan, before this investigation, did one earlier on. It seemed from our reporting like it was fairly short in scope of who they talked to. The question I wonder about is, did they have his university phone and that was all they could check? Was there another phone where you could see text messages and have access to some of that? And was that in play? I don't know the answer of that. But remember, this is a guy who it's on record that he deleted a bunch of text messages when he was, and it wasn't that long ago, right? And so there's that. So you're thinking, if he knows he's doing something inappropriate, which, he's married and he's having this relationship, by nature of that, I'm guessing he's not doing that on his university phone after his experience, as reckless as it appeared he was with other women and how he was interacting. I don't think he was going to be that reckless, but you never know. And then the other part about what you just said, Ralph, which I don't disagree with any of it, but he was promoted. He worked his way up. He was only an offense coordinator, by the way, 1 year. He was the offensive line coach. But what was significant, I think, if you're Michigan, is because Harbaugh had those suspensions, it wasn't like he was the offensive coordinator and got promoted. He was the head coach, and he beat Penn State at Penn State. And it wasn't the Penn State that went 6-6. It was a top 15 Penn State team.
And
he
Ohio
beat
State
Ohio State
twice,
at
right?
the end.
Right.
Yeah, but he beat Ohio State once as the head coach, as the interim head coach, right? And so you saw this from this guy. I think it would have been hard for them to not go in that direction, especially because Harbaugh didn't make the decision till later in the later in the process. It was in January. So I could kind of see how Michigan ended up promoting him. Now, again, the vetting process, like a lot of this stuff started to really rear its head as far as I understand it, in the spring of 2024. He'd already been named the head coach. He'd probably been in the head coach role for maybe 3 months. And then I think there was starting to be some red flags going up inside the athletic department. And then it escalated into the fall. So just, this story is not done. It is going to I suspect it's going to get even messier. And it's just the latest scandal at Michigan.
Stu, before I let you go here, I just want to make sure, I think it speaks to when the dam breaks inside the building, right? When things go awry, what you end up doing is trying to poke holes in in where the dam is cracking, as opposed to understanding the bigger picture. So, we have this problem. We have this problem. But you're not really, I often feel like that's what undercuts large organizations is they have committed to this person to a certain degree, and they see these problems, but maybe they're not seeing the bigger picture of what the problems are. And they're just trying to salvage and figure out fixes, oh, this is a problem, so we're going to fix this, and this is a problem with Sherrone, and oh, that doesn't look great with Sherrone, but they're still winning, so we can kind of get by. So you just feel like what you end up doing is almost trying to justify your initial decision as opposed to stepping back and saying, you know what, maybe we picked the wrong guy here, Stu.
Well, to that point, Biff Poggi, interim coach of Michigan right now, had a press conference Monday morning, not related to the story, just press conference that head coaches do, and he was asked a lot about his chances of getting the head coaching job. And one of the things he said, he's interviewed for the job, he said a couple times, but it's been 5 years of, let's just call it what it is, a malfunctioning organization where there's something every year. I know the athletic director has made it very clear he doesn't want any more of that. If I'm named the coach, which again, I don't know if I am, there will be a massive self-examination of what happens in the building, and you can expect a lot of changes. Biff was there during the Harbaugh years. I don't think it was an accident that he used that 5-year time frame. And to your point, Ralph, it's like nobody would have dared say anything like that when they were winning 3 straight Big Ten titles and a national championship under Harbaugh. But now that the dam has broken, somebody who was there right in the inside and seen it all up close is like, yeah, this has been wrong for some time. This has been malfunctioning organization for some time. So the curtain is finally being peeled back thanks to the reporting of folks like Bruce and Austin and Katie. And I think you're right that there's more to come. Let's take a quick break.
All right, we're back and we have some news. It was a newsy Monday, aside from Bruce and Katie and Austin's great reporting on Sherrone Moore. A couple of things popped up. I think the most interesting one is, guys, Notre Dame USC is going on hiatus, which seems unfathomable to me that these two schools are not going to play. They had one more on the books next year. Notre Dame, the news broke. I don't know if I broke it first, maybe Ross, Dellinger, but we were real close. News broke that Notre Dame was about to agree to a deal or agreed to a deal with BYU for a home and home in 2026 and 2027. That raised a huge red flag. Really? What does this mean? So quickly, couple of phone calls, and what we were able to report was that meant the USC game is off next year. And as of right now, USC, Notre Dame is again on an indefinite hiatus. Stu, your thoughts?
Just a crying shame. Yet another example of people in college sports leadership doing things that the fans don't want, right? Like kind of spitting in the fans' face. I'm sure the Notre Dame BYU games will be cool, right? Like 2 good programs, nothing wrong with that. But the Notre Dame fans want to see them play USC, and the USC fans want to see them play Notre Dame. And you can't figure this out. From your reporting, what was ultimately the sticking point?
So, and this was my next question I might throw to Bruce is like, because you've been following this as well, and that is who's to blame here. And I like to sidestep that a little bit because I feel like, as I said, with other issues in college sports, rarely are there heroes and villains so clearly defined when it comes to any of these issues that sort of screw the fans in college sports. Notre Dame, USC is in the Big Ten now, and they have 9 Big Ten games and are worried about when the game is played. Traditionally, it's played middle of the season in Notre Dame or at the end of the season when it's played at USC, right? That's been the alternating schedule for a while. And USC, with its Big Ten schedule and its travel, feels like, hey, I think we'd rather play this early in the season. Oh, by the way, would you be open-minded to playing it on a neutral playing field? I had a source this morning say that even as early as this morning, as Monday morning when we were taping this, Monday afternoon, the ADs at USC and Notre Dame, Jen Cohen at USC, Pete Bavacqua at Notre Dame, were trying to figure out a way to get this thing sorted out, and they couldn't. So it really does sort of come down to what USC believes is it's hard, like right now being in the Big Ten, it's not necessarily beneficial to them to just sign up for USC Notre Dame as it has always been. But again, I'll throw it to you, Bruce, because you're close to there, literally and figuratively. Who do you think is to blame for USC Notre Dame going on, again, an indefinite hiatus?
I thought, Ralph, going into this story, I felt like it was more of a USC thing, to be honest, because parameters changed, right? I don't know, because taking this aside for a second, because these conferences are so bloated. Yeah, there's Oregon, they still play them. Yeah, there's Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State. Now Indiana's really good, but because conferences are so big, it's not like you're going to play all of them. You may only play 2 of them. And who knows if they're all going to be, Ohio State's probably going to always be really good. And I think Oregon is too. But I think that part, to me, feels a little hollow, because I know a lot of old USC people out here who hate the idea that they would be running from Notre Dame. The fact that Notre Dame released the schedule news, I feel like gives some USC folks a little bit of cover. I don't know if it's as cut and dry that I haven't talked to people about it today, to be honest. I think it's not a surprise the way it was trending. I think it's unfortunate because, the timing of this, we just had felt like 5 days in a row of Notre Dame angst, in the national college football space. And now you have this story, and it's just like, I mean, we're all gonna move on, like I think you guys were saying, BYU is a good program. I don't think if you're Notre Dame, I think you'd love to say, hey, it'd be great if you could play them both. But my gut is it was more of a USC thing than it was a Notre Dame thing, Ralph.
As you said, they were scheduled to play one more game, right? So that, I think, will hint a little bit of like, oh, wait, you couldn't take that extra year or that extra couple of months. Why'd you have to do it now? Again, that's a little fuzzy right now. I'm gonna refrain from playing, heroes and villains here and who's exactly to blame. But I can understand if I'm a USC fan, maybe shifting it a little bit. To give people like an idea though, USC and Notre Dame have played every year since 1926, with 4 exceptions. During World War II, when I think that the U.S. wanted to limit some travel, right, because of various reasons. And during the pandemic. So it literally took either a war or a plague to keep USC and Notre Dame from playing for 100 years. And now they're not going to play. And it just seems like, as you said, Stu, yet another time when, tradition goes out the window. And now we end up with, again, Notre Dame, BYU, which is fine, but this seems ridiculous.
It's fine on the Notre Dame side, if you will, but the stupid thing about this for USC is there are certain schools, Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame is probably one of these as well. You could put anybody in an opposing uniform and the stadium's going to sell out. USC is absolutely not one of those. Their attendance swings wildly. They're in a market where they're trying to get attention from the Lakers and the Dodgers and so on and so forth. This year, USC's home schedule, guys. So you've already taken away some of the natural, Pac-12 rivalries that those fans enjoyed going to see. This year at home, USC played Missouri State, Georgia Southern, Michigan State, Michigan, that's nice, Nebraska, Northwestern, Iowa, and UCLA. So you're already giving them very few games that they really care about, and now you're taking away one of the 2 most important ones with UCLA. Guys, what are we doing here? Honestly.
Yeah. Last one I want to throw at you, because I know there was this talk of Dan Wolken, our colleague over at, or a friend and colleague over at Yahoo Sports, wrote a column about a week and a half ago about how, ADs are very frustrated with Notre Dame and maybe they'll get freezed out of scheduling. And that may be the case, but understand Notre Dame in future schedules, home and home against Auburn, home and home against Alabama, home and home against Texas, home and home against Michigan, Michigan State, Indiana, 12-year deal with Clemson. I understand that, the ACC of it all, of Notre Dame's schedule, maybe lacks a little rigor at times when they end up with Syracuse on a down year and Stanford on a down year, maybe Wake on a down year, Florida State on a down year. But generally speaking, Notre Dame doesn't seem to be getting frozen out by other big schools.
All right, Ralph, I want to push back on something very strong that you said a minute ago.
Oh, okay.
The most interesting thing that happened today in college football ain't that. It's that Bobby Petrino is joining the circus in Chapel Hill. So now we've got Bill Belichick, Mike Lombardi, Jordan Hudson, And now, I don't know if he's bringing his motorcycle or not, Bobby Petrino is leaving Arkansas, where as the interim, they didn't win it. They were dreadful, but his offense was pretty potent. And I think the offense in Chapel Hill will get a lot better. Guys, what are you most excited about if you're excited about this pairing? Stu, I know you have eyes on this place. Give it.
Well, what you said is absolutely right. Once you get past the circus aspect of it and why did Bobby Petrino keep getting all these chances? They're about to get really good on offense. Arkansas, like you said, Bruce, I don't think they won a game once he took over as the interim coach, if I'm not mistaken. And they still finished with the number 10 offense in the country. Wherever Bobby Petrino goes, they put up a lot of yards and score a lot of points. Now, he doesn't control whether Belichick and Lombardi. He's totally at the mercy of Belichick and Lombardi and their, Super Bowl evaluation skills to actually bring in some players and a quarterback that's not Gio Lopez. But from a schematic standpoint, give Belichick credit. That was a really good hire.
I think so. Are we heading towards middle of next year, maybe toward November? North Carolina interim head coach Bobby Petrino, Bill finally gets frustrated and says, I had enough of this nonsense after going, I don't know, like a 3-4 start or a 3-6 start. And all of a sudden, Bobby Petrino is again trying to position himself for another head coaching job by stepping in to lead the Tar Heels. I think you're right, Stu, though. They will get better offensively, but the volatile mix, the other thing that we haven't considered yet is, we wrote that story like mid-season about how dysfunctional the player personnel aspect was going into this season that's actually going on. How they built basically a bad roster because, to sum it up, Mike Lombardi really didn't know what he was doing on the college side, so they built a bad roster. Mike Lombardi's still there. There has been no signs that the powers that be or the power structure within that side of the personnel side of that department is changing. Now, maybe it does. Maybe they do bring in some people that have a bigger voice and they do get that straightened out a little bit, Bruce. But just like the whole Lombardi of it all and Petrino of it all and Belichick of it all, that just seems like some very strong and odd personalities to go into next season with, especially if things don't go well.
Yeah, and I think almost at the same time the news was getting out, they had a 4-star quarterback recruit they signed last year who's announced his intentions that he was going in the portal. He's talented, and I think there was a lot of optimism. Remember, Lombardi, after our story came out, did this thing where he was like, I know what we said. We're going all in on high school recruits.
That's right.
It takes a while to develop them.
Right. They're talking about signing 40 guys, right?
That's what they said. So if that's the case, if you're going all in on high school and you're saying just be patient, maybe there isn't much Bobby Petrino able to be able to do next year if that's the roster he's being given.
The crazy thing to me is, of those people I had mentioned, obviously Belichick, Jordan Hudson, now Petrino, and obviously Lombardi, the most interesting guy in that football program is actually Mike Lombardi's assistant. And it is a longtime SEC assistant coach named Lance Thompson. And if you know, you know. He is, I always thought, if Netflix or HBO or some production house wanted to get the most juiciest college football series drama, they would hire Lance Thompson as a consultant and say, give me your best stuff. Because if you know a lot of coaches in the world, they'll be like, Lance knows everything. Well, Lance is the guy behind the scenes. That place... I would be so, the story we did, whatever it was, 2 months ago was fascinating on a lot of levels because I felt like it got to the ineptitude of Lombardi in the college football world. I would be so interested about what's actually going on behind the scenes with all these. Now you're adding Petrino into the mix. And again, if they're I think this was a bone of contention before Ralph was on the show about where should we rank Mac Brown in the top 25 coaches? That every year we have that conversation when Ralph would come on. But Mac Brown, even when he struggled, they went to bowl games. They didn't go 4-8, right? And so now they're digging out of this hole. Very interested. It feels like the drama that you get in the SEC without the winning. Like that's how it looks to me.
Speaking of bowl games, all right, we're going to preview the playoff, the quarterfinals of the playoff next week when we're closer to actually having those games played. Like we referenced them yesterday's episode, but like I think we're going to go a more in-depth preview. However, there are bowl games. There are still bowl games and lots of them through the next week and a half before we get to December 31st, January 1st, when the quarterfinals of the playoff are played. So I'm going to start with you, Stu. What bowl game are you looking forward to over the next few days?
Well, it's not just because Notre Dame made a big stink and opted out of it, but I do think, and I wrote a big story on the Pop-Tarts Bowl in like February, early March, about how the game itself has existed for a long time, like the former Tangerine Bowl, Micron PC Bowl, Russell Athletic Bowl. In 2 years, though, of the Pop-Tart branding, they have turned it into a phenomenon. And frankly, it's like the antidote to the bowl games are meaningless. We don't care. We're not going to watch them. A lot of people watched that game last year. And granted, Cam Ward was in it, right? Two teams that were, I think, both 10-2. But a lot of it was the hoopla, the mascot sacrifice and all that. So that stuff's all going to be there still. I'm sure they will have more wrinkles. Those marketing people are really smart, but it's also two good teams. And I know it ended kind of poorly for Georgia Tech, but they had a really good season, one of their best seasons in years. They're playing a BYU team that barely missed the playoff. It's ABC, middle of the day on a Saturday. Sign me up. What about you, Bruce?
I don't know what ReliaQuest is, but I know that their bowl game is having Diego Pavia against Phil Parker in Iowa, and the offensive line that the Hawkeyes have just won the Joe Moore Award. I think that's a really good matchup. You got Diego, who's probably got a bigger chip on his shoulder now because everybody but us who voted for the Heisman didn't vote for him. So
it was just three of us, apparently.
I can't wait for that game. I think it's I think it's next Wednesday. So I know when you guys were saying in the next few days, there's a couple other games I want to see, I'm interested in, but that one's my headliner of the non-playoff games.
Yeah,
Ralph?
Yeah, good picks, because I think all four of those teams will be into it. That's been the biggest problem with the bowl games. Like, you never really know what players are showing up, what coaches are showing up, how motivated are these guys who do show up, and how long will they play? Like Cam Ward showed up last year, but only played a half. It seems like these four are all into it and want to go out and end their seasons on a bang, and they're all four good teams. I'm not 100% sure if that qualifies for the game I'm going to talk about, which is the Pinstripe Bowl. But it's Clemson and Penn State. It's also like they were two top 5 teams going into the season. This was two top 5 teams that finished a combined 12-12. Maybe the two biggest disappointments of the season. I guess, there was quite a few that went under that header. LSU would, I guess, also qualify. There were others, but I don't know if there were two more disappointing teams coming into the season. It's a cool helmet matchup. It's at Yankee Stadium. For them to get this level of team in a bowl like that is pretty odd. I've covered a bunch of Pinstripe Bowls. I've never had two with more marquee teams than that. Though Notre Dame has been there, and I think Penn State has been there. And so anyway, yeah, I'm not sure exactly who's showing up for each team, but both teams were at least, closed the season playing pretty well, especially Penn State. So I think it could be an interesting matchup. And if nothing else, a couple of interesting helmets in Yankee Stadium on, I think it's the 27th.
Yeah, it's next Saturday. I think Clemson will be into it. They do have some opt-outs. But I do think Klubnik's playing.
I think, yes, he is. Yeah, he had said, I think he's playing on that.
Dabo will make sure those guys take that game seriously, just like they've taken all their other second-rate games recently seriously. I don't know what to expect from Penn State.
Well,
other than there'll be the requisite interview with Matt Campbell on the sideline or in the stands during the game, right?
All right, let's take our last break, and then we'll come back and we will hit the mailbag.
All right. Usually we save the mailbag for later in the week, but there is no later in the week episode for Christmas. So we are going to get to your questions in this episode and find out who is going to get the $12 Trader Joe's gift card. Guys, Trader Joe's helped us out this past week. Hanukkah, my wife was busy, didn't really have time to like do the whole homemade make latkes thing. So she went and got some Trader Joe's latkes and the family loved it. I realize it's a little too late now for that this year, but any members of the tribe who are listening, remember it for next year. Trader Joe's is your spot for some good Hanukkah food like latkes.
First up, let's go to Stu on a question about home field advantage after we saw two playoff teams in the two games that were competitive win on the road this weekend. Hi, Bruce, Stu, and Ralph. I hear all you referring to some stadiums as a very impressive home field advantage, a really tough environment in which to play. For those of us who don't get to watch games in person very often, will you please spend a moment describing what this means? Other than being loud on third down, what makes a place hard to play? Thanks. Looks like Lois Kim.
It's a very timely question, Lois, because once again, the supposed home field advantage of Kyle Field did not come through for the Aggies this past weekend. I think they have a bit of a history of that. Guys, I think sometimes you'll get a situation like that where the crowd causes some false starts. But I think this is not specific to college football, but all sports, when they talk about home field advantage, I do think a lot of it is just the fact that the home team gets to sleep in their own beds and they know the place well and feels good to have people cheering for you. And the other team is the one that has to get on the plane and do meetings in their hotel room or in their hotel conference rooms all day and do a walkthrough. It's just, it kind of stinks to be a road team. You know, it's like, I feel like some sports it's more pronounced than others, like in the NBA. But, you know, the odds makers say there's a 3-point bump for the team playing at home field. So it has to be real.
Right. And the records will show it too, right? Like generally speaking, more home teams win than road teams. I do think it really does often, like our emailer sort of boiled it down to Lois. Is it just about being loud on third down? That really is a big part of it. Like having that noise when you're trying to operate an offense, be it third down or other downs, is a kind of a pain in the butt, right? It does make things difficult. False starts, and how do we snap here with a clap or a silent count? Like those little things do add up and make life a little more difficult. And I do think, you know, that environment again, it can get in your head a little bit.
Yeah, I think Stu also hit a key point though. It's the travel aspect and being out of your element and a little off. I think that's a big thing, especially with 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, right? You're not talking about professionals or whatever. Like, I think yesterday, the Jaguars, who are good this year under Liam Cohen, they went into what used to be Mile High Stadium. I don't know if it's Invesco or what they call it now, but in Denver, tough place to play, really loud, and they went and they beat a really good Broncos team. And I'm not saying that wouldn't happen in college because we just saw, you know, two teams win in tough places and in the playoff, but you also remember Oklahoma went to Tuscaloosa and won there. You know, I just think it factors in the maturity of a team as much as anything else. And I think one of the things, to tie it back to Alabama a little bit, I remember hearing from some of their coaches about how important it was, you know, to have Tim Keenan back in the middle of the defense. You know, I don't think he was there for Florida State. And it was like, hey, when we get punched in the stomach, you need that guy on the sideline to challenge everybody and get them kind of back dialed in.
All right. Question 2. How about, actually, I can tee up you as well here, Bruce, because we're only doing 2 questions today. So okay. I'm just going to take hold of the reins here. And the question is titled Meat Market for the NIL Era. Stu, Bruce, and Ralph love the show, especially the multiple episodes per week as the season culminated. Meat Market, Bruce Feldman's book, is my favorite college football book ever. I love the inside look at recruiting during that time period. Who is going to write the defining book about recruiting in the NIL and portal era? Are you up for going at it again, Bruce? That's from Randy Pullum in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Thank you, Randy. You are definitely going to get my vote for the Trader Joe's gift card. I'll buy you Trader Joe's stuff.
Buttering
myself
people up
if these two yokels don't agree with me. So the part of that process, I feel like I was undercover for 2 years inside the Ole Miss athletic program. And I was so leery of like the compliance officer going, he's got to go, or the AD, also doing that at that time. And fortunately for me, it didn't happen. But it is such a, I mean, right now it's a different animal, as you said. I mean, the person I would nominate to do this is our old friend Max Olson. He kind of lives for the portal. He's also the right age to do it now. He does have 2 kids. I didn't have kids at the time, and I think that makes it harder. But I think what you end up having to do is there's so many real agents. When I say real, I'm not saying like it's Jimmy Sexton or, whatever, but there's just so many agents who are involved in this process that you have to be in with. For me, it was like basically taking the 1,000 names that they consider to whittle down to the 25 they're going to sign. And it's a year-long process. I mean, this is like this weird mad dash of how it's happening. And I think, not just who would write it, where would I want to be? Because if you had asked me at the time, Ole Miss obviously doesn't have the biggest brand as, say, Texas or Georgia did at that time. But I would, if you told me which would you rather have been inside the war room of, it would have been Ole Miss, because Ed Orgeron lived for recruiting and was just such a fascinating character. Whereas Mark Richt, I'm not sure I would have gotten the same fireworks. You don't
think Mark Richt would have provided the same type of color that Coach O would?
I don't think. I think there's a handful of coaches who would have been in that realm. Leach would have probably been interesting. He didn't care about recruiting the way Orgeron did, though. Mm. You need somebody who is obsessed with it. You know what? Mario Cristobal is obsessed with recruiting. And if you looked at their defense, Keontae Scott, David Blaze, really good. They got Mesidor in the portal. A lot of their best players, obviously Carson Beck's a starting quarterback, came from the portal. And I think that, that would be ideal to have a program like that is so invested in it. Texas Tech would be really interesting, just because of, Cody Campbell and his involvement. That's my suggestion. I don't know about you. I'm sure you guys have.
Yeah, the Texas Tech would probably be the one to do. But here's the problem, and this is not specific to Texas Tech. I don't think you can do this book because almost everything they do in the portal is against the rules. The portal...
Stu, it was the same thing back then. You weren't allowed to comment on recruits. And here I am sitting on it felt like, I remember I think Sankey was the compliance guy at the SEC, and it was almost the whole book is violations because they weren't supposed to be doing that.
But no, I don't mean what you but they could you could document them calling recruits, and that was fine. The transfer portal might as well be called the tamper portal. It's all tampering. It's, the NIL deals aren't pay for play. Of course they're pay for play. You'd have to unless you're okay with the school getting in big trouble, you would have to almost redact 80% of it. It's not like let's say you just went there once the official portal window opens. You would have missed most of the action by then.
Well, I'm the only one who hasn't written a book of the 3 of us, so I guess maybe it would be me who would have to do it. But I got to tell you guys, I'm terrified of the idea of writing a book, so I don't know if I'm going to raise my hand for that assignment. What
about it's 2025. What if you did, instead of wrote a book, you did a 10-part narrative podcast about how a school puts a portal class together?
Stu, man, that seems like a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Hey, there's a reason I haven't done it in 18 years. It's a lot of work.
I feel like I already got a job that gives me a lot of work. I don't know if I want to sign up for another one. A side job that's also a lot of work.
On the subject of book writing, I remember this going back to our ESPN magazine office in New York, and I ran into Gene Wojciechowski, terrific writer, reporter. He's teaching a journalism class at Tennessee as we speak. And he's written a lot of books and a lot of good books. And I remember I said to him, what's the most words you've ever written in a day for the book? Because you're trying to pace yourself to get to this. And I forgot what he said. I want to say it was 5 or 10,000 words. And I was like, were they good words though, Gene? Because there's been I think I had written maybe 2,000, 20, 20, but then you end up going back and you're I just kind of hit the word count and just kind of I thought I was productive. I wasn't very good and I had to delete a bunch of stuff. I think that's the thing. It's such a marathon when you're writing a book like that, especially one that you're in the middle of the reporting while you're writing and reporting. And, I don't know, Ralph. I would miss you, but I don't think we would have you on this podcast if you were doing that kind of venture.
But of the three of us, you're the only one really that could go in bed at a program for months because you're an empty nester now. You know, I can't pull that off right now.
Yes. Yeah, you think Narduzzi would be up for it? I could just go.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Hang out.
Narduzzi would be phenomenal to do that with.
He would be interesting. He would be an interesting guy to embed with, without questions, too.
All right, I think the Trader Joe's gift card could be a close vote this time because I already know who Bruce is voting for.
You guys got to get on my side here.
I'm voting for Lois. I thought the home field advantage question was a good. It's a topic that needed to be addressed, and she was the one to bring it up.
I'll break the tie and go with Lois only because I just cannot deal with Bruce's ego. So we're going to.
We don't want to set the precedent that if you just butter up one of the hosts, you'll get the gift card.
Frankly, I think we already have. I think that's happened with me. So we may have already set that precedent, but I'm going to push back against it and we'll give it to Lois. Thank you, Lois. Email us at
theaudiblepod@gmail.com. You know what? You lose a vote for not knowing that at this point now. I think you should buy him some groceries just for that sake. You should go on a Trader Joe's run and get him some food. You owe it to him.
All right.
I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. But I do believe Lois is the first female recipient of the Trader Joe's gift card, which is a big day here at the Audible. Maybe we should send her too.
Okay.
So we're going to take a little break for the holidays. Hope you guys have a great holiday wherever you are. We will be back for our regularly scheduled early next week. Not a Sunday show because there's, as much as I'm looking forward to those Pop-Tarts bowls and whatnot, I don't know that we need to do a live Sunday morning show, but we'll be back Monday and we will see you then.